let's go ahead and review the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. We're going to start with the bucket system and then kind of go from there. We'll go into pass optimal lineups and GPP winning lineups. I'll also talk about lineups, like how I tried building lineups last week. It was interesting to say the least. So I'll get into it here. Looking at the bucket system, the first thing I want you to pay attention to is just the success column right here. Y's mean the projections that I had for those buckets were successful. The ends mean they were not successful. And when I scroll down, you can see there were 4 buckets that did not succeed. They did not pass. So the worst that the bucket system's ever done was 31 out of 35 buckets. This is technically 32 out of 36 buckets. I am going to build a lineup using strict conditionals, which is obviously using the projections I had, to see if I can still take down a GPP. Just to show you that even if you do follow the sweet spot process, regardless of the buckets failing, and this means you either can't build an optimal lineup with the projections that I provided, or there weren't enough golfers inside the top 10. Either not enough golfers or way more than I had projected. That's how we get this to be a no. Otherwise, if it's within the projections of either in the optimal or in the top 10, then it's a yes. So yeah, 32 out of 36 isn't super great. It's not terrible. I'm looking at my sweet spot optimals, so I don't include this column into the success rate. But oh, okay, never mind. I was thinking of an old approach that I did, but that's not what this column represents anymore. This column represents a lineup you can create being the sweet spot optimal using the sweet spot conditions. It doesn't show you like how well it did. I'll show you that. I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself as I'm going through this. Yeah, 32 out of 36, not super great. I wish it was closer to obviously 36 out of 36. Last week was 35 out of 36. I mean by last week, I mean the Farmers Insurance Open. So not terrible. If we go into the pass optimal lineups, because that's where I want to go from here. I shouldn't say pass up, the optimal lineup and the GPP winning lineup of last week. You can see the optimal left $2,200 on the table. That's really not doable. Now, before I get further into this, I want to remind you, this tournament was a 3-course rotation. There was a lot of wind and just all elements except for snow. I don't think snow really happened, but they were talking about how the mist felt like ice, like icicles hitting them. It was brutal. And there wasn't much of a wave stack, but you did have 2 hours of like a tee time slot for each golf course. There were 3 golf courses used. Remember that. 156-man field, so they're split up equally in thirds. So a third of the field went to one course, a third went to the other, a third went to the other, and then they rotated until they played all 3 courses, and then a cut happened. Well, I was watching Jordan Spieth on Thursday because I heavily invested in Spieth this last week. I was watching his group play. He was with Ryan Palmer. And they got to hole 16, and the announcer started talking about how they start at Spyglass, by the way, which is the hardest course of the 3. And the announcers go, yeah, the wind just came out of nowhere. It picked up. And I mean, you saw the flags really bending. I think Spieth either bogeyed or double bogeyed one of his last holes, but on the last hole, he hits a drive and he stares at it for about 2 seconds and goes, oh my God. And the announcer goes, I can't see this one, guys. It got caught up in the sun. And another announcer goes, yeah, so that ball started out straight and it just bent to the right, as if the wind, a big gust of wind, hit it to the right. Now, I think we can believe that because when they got up to the green, Ryan Palmer hit a shot up to the green. I mean, he ended up double bogeying the hole, but he hit his ball up onto the green. The ball was at rest. Jake Owen, who was Jordan Spieth's partner, had his ball, or he was chipping onto the green. His ball stops for probably 2 seconds. Like, it visibly stopped. You know that that's where the ball was going to rest. But a huge gust of wind comes in, blows it back off of the green, almost right where Jake Owen was originally standing. Not only did his ball get blown, but so too did Ryan Palmer's. So a ball at rest on the green, you need to have really strong winds and really fast greens for, I should say this. You could have fast greens with a considerable amount of wind, or you could have kind of slower greens with a ton of wind. They're both going to push balls off of the green that are already resting on the green. I wouldn't say Spyglass are super fast. I'd probably categorize them as fast. So it was a really strong wind, and they're saying they're like 30-mile-an-hour gusts that were happening. Spieth caught that on his last hole. There were still probably at each golf course 30% of the field at each golf course still on the course, having to play through the rest of the tournament. With that, you saw tens. That's right, double-digit numbers on holes. There were some golfers that did that on hole 18 at Pebble, because the wind that was coming in was, I mean, I didn't hear what direction it was, but looking at the shot link data and seeing, I can't think of what it's called, you know, the graphics that show where the balls end up going. A lot of people found the water on the left side. I imagine the wind was blowing off from the right, but who knows? Still, when the wind gets up and it's really strong at Pebble Beach or just that Monterey Peninsula, it makes golfing really hard. So a lot of golfers, like Will Gordon was -6 before this wind happened, and it brought him down to -3. He was fortunate. Troy Merritt, I think, was running at even par, maybe even 1 under. He made a 10 on a hole, I believe. I think he was one of the victims of getting a 10 on a golf hole. And that was on 18 at Pebble. So this tournament in itself was extremely odd. And it's difficult to really put any analysis towards it that's worthwhile or meaningful, because the people that are able to finish before that wind came in are a lot of guys you see at the top of the leaderboard. So they weren't really affected by the wind. Now, there was another day, I think it was Saturday. Yeah, I got the play got suspended, and then they had to finish Sunday and then come back and try to play a little bit of round 4 on Sunday. So you had a bunch of withdraws. And if I were to scroll down at the bottom of the screen here, all these 90s represent withdraws. So all of these guys basically knew that they couldn't make the cut. This is the other thing that is a bummer. A lot of these golfers finished round 3, but because the tournament hadn't determined what the cut was, these guys were like, we're not coming back, we're leaving. So they gave them a withdraw instead of a miscut. So it looks odd. Now, some of them didn't finish. They probably had 2 holes left and like, nah, we're not going to make the cut. We're just going to go. Like, there's no possible way for us to make the cut. We're going to leave. And so they technically withdrew. So this tournament, all I'm getting at is this entire tournament was weird. Hard to use any type of stats. Obviously, we only had 1 golf course that recorded stats, and that was Pebble Beach. So of the 4 rounds of golf, you had a max of 2 rounds that recorded strokes gained stats, I should say. And then the guys that were cut only had 1 round of strokes gained data. I also just don't know what to do with what we see. You know, like even with the optimal lineup up here, even with the SweetSpot optimal, which is using the strict conditionals, I just don't know how much of it is really useful. And this is for future me listening to this video to be like, hey, this tournament, kind of an odd one. Maybe don't take too much, like don't look too much into it. It is definitely an anomaly. With that being said, your GPP winning lineup, 9,500 Justin Rose, 9,200 Denny McCarthy. Brendan Todd showed up a ton. And I mean a ton. If you were with me in the strategy video, he showed up on every single lineup of mine, and I could not stand it. Because I'm not a huge Todd truther. I don't really care to play Brendan Todd. But had I listened, it would have been better. And same with Justin Rose. He was another guy that showed up a lot. Danny McCarthy, no, he did not. Kieran Malnati, no, he's a 6K golfer. He showed up here and there, but because he's a 6K golfer, he only shows up once. You know, he doesn't really show up a lot. Kevin Yu, I actually have an interesting thing. He rated out really well in my model, and I'll show that hereafter when we go through Marquee Tee Times and kind of the sweet spot score. I kind of galaxy brained myself during this tournament when building lineups. I basically saw over the last 3 years no golfer that was in the optimal lineup or in the GPP winning lineup or something to that effect inside the top 10. None of them had 0% top 10 POA performance. Like they were above 0% when it came to top 10 success rates on POA. So I mean, they already had a previous top 10 on a POA surface. So that's what I went by. I really narrowed down my player pool and just got rid of all golfers that had 0% success rate for top 10s on POA golf courses. So that got rid of Kevin Yu. But Kevin Yu rated out really well in my model and showed up a bunch without me taking him out of it. So I ended up taking him out of it. That's where I'm getting at with that. So I'm going to get more into that here a little bit later. But yeah, Kevin Yu was also, he was your last person in the optimal lineup. Oh, I'm sorry. We're not talking about optimal lineups. We're talking about GPP winning lineups. I don't know how I got sidetracked there. Joseph Bramlett, 7,400. And then going down to Kevin Kisner, 85, which is kind of funny because we all talked ourselves off of Kevin Kisner, and that actually won a person at GPP. So interesting, right? Very interesting. Now, a more realistic lineup or a sweet spot optimal. This was me following the conditionals super strict. So when I run this out and I keep all of my minimum conditionals in here and I hit run optimize, you're going to get the lineup that we just saw on the screen. It's going to have 49,500, scored 635 points. Your GPP winning lineup scored 621. So the sweet spot optimal once again takes down a GPP had we went with the golfers that you see highlighted in green. So that means starting with Victor Hovland, going to Justin Rose, and then having 4 7K golfers, which I did not set my optimizer to do. Like I said, I was very strict. So basically what I ended up doing, the golfers that did not have top 10 POA percentages, like top 10 success rates on POA, were Kevin Yu, Joseph Bramlett, I believe it was Ben Martin. Let's see. If I scroll over here and look, Kevin Yu, Bramlett, Ben Martin, and Brandon Wu. Okay. So then I get rid of Brandon Wu, create another lineup to see how many points it would score, not including these people. That isn't what it said originally. Why did we cross that out? I had a lineup that scored 600. Oh, I see. Yep, I got it. I have to leave more money on the table. I think this uses 49.3, if I remember correctly. 49.1. Still doesn't make any sense. Okay, either way. The original one that I thought I saw was 603. And at 603, that would have been 5th place in the drive the green. I think like 595 would have been top 10. So would have had a decent performance, but yeah, I don't know what happened. Maybe I put a no on the wrong golfers. Either way, you're starting with Hovland and then you're going to Justin Rose. And then Brendan Todd. So that all happened. I crossed out Beau Hosler. I did not want Beau Hosler in my lineup. So that's on me. But following the sweet spot process, I mean, like I said, I galaxy brained myself. I went with, I X'd out anyone that had 0% in this column right here. So if you were kind of interested or wondering why or what I was talking about, it's this. I crossed that out and I created a very strict conditional, and I basically anchored all my lineups with Jordan Spieth, I also galaxy brained myself again because I thought the wind was going to be so bad at Pebble that I only allowed my optimizer to select one golfer from the Pebble golf course. So you can see there's 3 here in the top 10. These 3 were also in the optimal lineup. So like I said, galaxy brained myself, not super great. At least I made some money back, but this was definitely by far one of the worst performances that I've ever had playing DFS golf. And that's because, again, I got into the weeds. I thought I just saw some trends that I think you probably should just ignore. You know, the bucket system gives you projections to use. And they're there for your benefit. You know, I also got wrapped up in the course history 1 bucket, if you remember that one. 100% frequency rate. So I was looking at this column thinking, okay, that's going to happen again. Well, that bucket, if I put a filter on this, let me look at course history 3s. Not course history 3s, course history 1s. Taylor Moore, Jordan Spieth, Marcel Siem. So this made me I was sold on Jordan Spieth. And I feel like Jordan Spieth would have been fine if it wasn't for the weather on round 3. I think he was just at a bad place because he was playing Pebble round 3. The wind was up. This got delayed. He went through 9 holes, but through those 9 holes, I think he was either 3 or 4 over, something like that. And then just finished basically even par the rest of the way through. So it didn't help Jordan Spieth out whatsoever. I mean, I thought he put together a really good round 1. And then I think round 4, maybe nothing was there to light a fire under him. He was very far away from the lead, so it wasn't like he was going to catch up. He would have had to shot like 59 in order to challenge, if not just a comfortable top 5 or top 10. So Taylor Moore, though, I mean, I kind of made the joke like, well, if it's not Jordan Spieth, then it's got to be Taylor Moore. We know it's not Marcel Siem, so he could be the one guy to carry on the top 10 tradition, and he was 5 places short. So now when we look at this next year, this 100% frequency rate will go down. I imagine to 88 or something like that percent. But yeah, this is, again, galaxy brain myself. We have the projections. The projection was 0 to 1. 0.43 to 0.72. That's not telling you anything confident, right? We just don't. You take you don't look at it like it's a for sure, like it's certain that someone's going to be a top 10. Like this just doesn't have enough. 3 golfers in it. On average, we see 8.43. So I was stupid. I got to remember this for next year. I got to remember this for all tournaments going forward, not to get wrapped up in this number here, this frequency rate. But I am only human. That's what happens. You see patterns and you force yourself into choosing golfers that fit that pattern. So do I have anything else that I need to talk about when reviewing the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am? I don't think so. Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. Like I said, the SweetSpot Optimal beat the GPP winning lineup, and that again is following all the bucket projections to the strict projections that I have. So with that, oh yes, there is another thing. It would be the Marquee Tee Times. Now, someone made a comment during I think the live video, like, these aren't much of Marquee Tee Times. No, they're not. I mean, they were paired up in twosomes, and none of these were like super great. Like I would say the Fitzpatrick Kuchar and Seamus Power Thomas Dietrich lineups, or Marquee Tee Times. I thought those were great tee times. Like I really liked Seamus Power. I thought that was a good thing. If you didn't remember, Matt Fitzpatrick had kind of a neck injury going into this tournament, and he even said, yeah, he kind of tweaked it, you know, that Sunday before the tournament started, and he just wasn't sure. It was nagging him, and he was still gonna go out and play just to see how it was. Yeah, it didn't turn out super great. Now there is one golfer in here that was a part of the GPP winning lineup, and there's also one golfer here that was in the SweetSpot Optimal. So I also followed this kind of, you know, pretty closely. I obviously didn't start with Victor. I told you I did a lot of Jordan Spieth, but when I put this in, it basically put Spieth and Power together a lot, and if it wasn't Power, it was Dietrich. So that's kind of where I went to. And when you have Spieth that finished 63rd, and then Power Dietrich that was 15th and 37th, you're not winning any money. So that was unfortunate. Victor was definitely the guy to go to. A lot of people pivot off of Fitzpatrick, and I think they went to Hovland because it's just easier price points. It's just a $200 bump, whereas Spieth was a $500 bump from Matt Fitzpatrick. That's just how the cookie crumbles. I wasn't really into Victor Hovland. I was also more on the narrative. Another thing I got to bring up. That every single year we would see a 10K golfer that had a top 20 the year before. And I would say this year we did not have that, because our 10K golfer that was not in the top 10, so never mind. He didn't even play last year. There were no 10K golfers that finished top 20 last year that finished inside the top 10. So that's another trend that had been bucked during this tournament. But remember, the weather kind of makes this an anomaly, and we probably just don't think about it. We just kind of forget it, honestly. It's hard to really put a lot of value into this year's tournament for the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. But that's the last piece of information that I needed to provide. The Marquee Tee Times, I wasn't even sure I wanted to use them. I even mentioned that during the strategy video, where it's like, because I had to create these on the fly. I had to create the Marquee Tee Times on the fly because they came out right when I was like, the segment would have started. And I was like, hey, let me just double check. And sure enough, they'd come out on the PGA Tour. So I updated my spreadsheet live. It took all of maybe 1 minute. But then looking at the Marquee Tee Times, it's like, it's not super great. So Marquee Tee Times weren't super helpful whatsoever, and that's fine. This tournament was weird, so I'm gonna leave it there. That's my review of the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. The buckets still would have taken down a GPP, so remember that.